Ritika ma'am, please start sharing. Ritika ma'am.
फादर मैम ने स्टार्ट किया बट साउंड नहीं आ रहा है.
ठीक है, आप छोड़ दीजिए. So we will start straight away with the introduction. Amandeep, please come and give the introduction for
Okay,
God.
father.
Rest all can keep yourself muted.
Good afternoon to one and all present here. I am Mandeep Kaur, student of BA first year. Welcome you all to the fourth day of Value Education Lecture Series, and we are privileged to have Father Cyprian Creado, a Dominican priest who is presently working with the underprivileged children at University Children's Home Jaripatka. He has done his licentiate in canon law from Angelican University, Rome. It's an indeed honor to have you today with us, sir. And now I welcome and request you to enlighten us with your thoughts on our today's topic, respect for life. Welcome, sir.
Okay, so I'll begin. It's raining heavy and there's a lot of noise. I hope you can all hear me. Yes, maybe I'll try to speak loud as possible. And just going straight into this very topic of respect for human life, we need to look into our own present social context. And our present social context is marked by a very dramatic struggle. And this struggle is between two cultures, the culture of life and the culture of death. And especially now during this time of the pandemic, during the coronavirus, I think it's now a struggle between life and death. And so we need to develop a deep critical sense of discerning true values and also authentic need. Let us all remember this, that all together, all human beings together, we must build a new culture of life. And I would say that the most basic principle, especially principle in biomedical ethics, they always look at it as respect for life. And that is the most basic principle, that each one of us has that respect of life, especially for the life of others. And it's a universal, this principle is universal, though in a manner in which it is interpreted. But the basic principle is respect for life. And we can say that this principle, in a way, is rooted in that special relationship which the human being enjoys to the life-giving relationship or the life-giving action of God and from the very destiny of each human being. So I would say that, one need not be a believer. One need not be a believer to affirm the dignity and the sanctity of human life. But this basic principle, the principle of respect for human life, in some way or the other, will help us to acknowledge the sanctity of human life, that human life is created by God, and that our life, each one's life, is something sacred. Sacred because it's created by God. It is created by God. And that's why, this notion, the notion of dignity, the notion of respect for human life is based on this very fact, that life is a gift from God, and it is destined for the fullness of life. And so each one of us, we have, in a way, to say that very right to enjoy the fullness of life, even when we are surrounded or when we are caught up in this pandemic of coronavirus. We have that right to have the fullness of life. The American Declaration of Independence, in the American Declaration of Independence, it is written, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, now here when I say men, it includes all men and women, okay? So um, that's how it's written in the declaration, that all men are created equal. It's beautiful. That all men are created equal and that they are endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These three things stand out very much in the American Declaration of Independence: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And as I said, we are all destined to the fullness of life. And the 1948 the UN General Assembly Declaration, it listed among all the other inalienable rights of all the members of, I would say, the human family was life, liberty, and security of person. So, in a way, we can see in these two big declarations, life and happiness, the pursuit of happiness, or rather, as we could say, the fullness of life is brought out in a very strong manner. Now, what is also important is that while we have that respect for life, while we have that respect for life, we also need to keep in mind, and what is very, very important, is the consistent ethics of life. The consistent ethics of life. That we look at life, each one's life, as something sacred, as each one's life very, very important. And so this life needs to be protected. And this will happen if we are consistent with regard to the ethics of life. One of the nice examples that we can really have about consistent ethics of life is with regard to President George Bush, the senior man, the senior man. When he became president, when he became the president of the United States, it was said that he was a man who was very much pro-life. He was a man who was very much pro-life, and everything that he did with regard to safeguarding of life. But when you go back, we go back when he was the governor of Texas, when President George W. Bush was the governor of Texas, sadly, we are told that he carried out several sentences of death, several death penalties he did carry out. And also, as president, he gave a deaf ear to some of the pleading for mercy. But as president, he worked in such a manner. He publicly also expresses his, one of the things was his anti-abortion stand. He was a man, as president, he expressed himself as pro-life. But then, before that, we saw that as governor, he carried out a lot of death penalties. And then we know that he is the same man who waged that war. He exhausted, or rather, he did not even try to exhaust all other possibilities for a peaceful resolution, especially to the situation in Iraq. And so we can see that, one side there is a respect for life, on the other side, so there's no ethical consistency in his life, So in that manner, we need to have, there's a need for that ethical consistency in life if we are going to hold fast to this very principle, respect for life. And so it is necessary because this very principle, respect for life, is based on two basic principles. The first is that human life is sacred. And the second is that human life is social. Human life is sacred and human life is social. Because human life is sacred, because human life is sacred, each one of us, irrespective of our religion, we don't bring religion play here, because human life is sacred, we have an obligation to defend the human life, we have an obligation to protect it. And along with that, we also have the obligation to promote, to foster that human life. And in a big way, we have to contribute to the flourishing of this human life. And flourishing of this human life is from the moment of conception right up to natural death. I use the word natural death. And so we have an obligation to promote human life. As the saying goes, from womb to tomb. That's where we need to appreciate, we need to have respect for every life. And because, as I said, the second principle, because human life is social, because human life is social, society as such has an obligation to protect and foster it. Society has a right, society has a duty to promote, to find out means how to promote, how this life may flourish, and especially during this pandemic, all the lockdowns or whatever means the government is trying to use. We need to cooperate. We need to cooperate not because the government or not in support of the government, but we need to cooperate in order to, out of respect for that human life, out of respect for each one's life, and also in a way to promote so that each one, every human being enjoys that fullness of life. So it's on these two principles, that life is sacred and life is social, that this very principle, this basic principle, respect for human life emerges, especially in the medical field, especially in the medical field, especially when it comes to experimentation on human life, and also it comes very much in play with regard to the rights of patient. So in the medical field, this basic principle is very, very important, the respect for human life. Now, so because of this, that life is sacred, life is social, in a way we should be able to say that life is to be treated with awe and dignity and respect. Each one has to be given his dignity. And just to go a little bit away from, I would just say, as the Christian teaching would say that, we are created, as the Bible says, we are created in His image and likeness. Okay, just keep that aside. And so I would say that life is to be treated with awe and dignity and respect. That's why it is necessary that it be protected as well as it be affirmed. And more positively, I would say, more positively, we are called. We are called, each one of us is called to create those conditions that will actually provide for human flourishing. Now, human flourishing, I'm not talking about population-wise, but flourishing, making life more beautiful, making life in a way from the medical point of view, a good, healthy life, promoting life, and not just from the medical point of view, but also from the social point of view. Yes, because we may be different in status, but we are all equal in dignity. Dignity-wise, every human being, whether he be a rickshaw puller, or whether he be a big engineer, or whatever it is, or the Prime Minister, or the President, we all share that same dignity. And this dignity comes from being a creature of God. That it is God who has created us, and it is God who bestows this dignity upon each one of us. And so we need to acknowledge this dignity, the dignity of every human being. From the social point of view, from the development school, where if you look into it, how does personhood come upon a person? There are different schools, but the developmental school, it says that it is the social status that gives you the dignity. But we need to look at the dignity of every human being as being a creature created by God. So we are all equal in dignity, although social status we may be different. But let us remember this, that it is not the social status that gives us our dignity, or rather makes us more dignified than an ordinary person. No. We all are of equal value. Every human being is of equal value. And that's why, since every human being is of equal value, we need to create conditions that will provide for human flourishing. So I would say, that respect for life calls us to defend life. Respect, this very principle, respect for life, it calls us to defend life from every threat. Human life is being threatened from every corner, like war, terrorism, drug, sexual irresponsibility, alcoholism, abortion, suicide. Nowadays, suicide, the farmer suicide because students are not getting, their wife are not getting the connectivity, and so they cannot get, a poor person cannot get what is required, an Android phone, and so he cannot cope up with the class and all sorts of things, and then he tries, no connectivity, and then he loses his interest in life and everything and commits suicide. But committing that suicide does not give him a connectivity, but rather it disconnects him completely. In a way, that person is out of range, out of network coverage. And so these are some of the threats: suicide, famine, denial of health care, and also, going against human rights. I think these are some of the areas which we need to fight with. We need to defend human life in respect of some of these threats. And now the COVID situation, the COVID-19 situation, and it's the need of the hour that human life flourish, especially with regard, and especially during this time when the pandemic has really created a havoc for the whole world. And so we are called to enhance the conditions of human living. We are called to enhance the condition for human living, and we need to live, every human being, no matter what the status, from the point of view of the dignity of the person. The person is social. It calls us to live in solidarity with each one, and especially this pandemic calls us to live in solidarity with the poor, with the neglected, and stand up for the lives and dignity of every human being. Every life is important. Everyone's life is sacred. Everyone's life is of equal dignity. And so during this pandemic, we need to live in solidarity. We need to respect the life even of those poor people. We need to respect the life. We need to protect their life, especially in these times. And so let us always remember this, that the sanctity of human life does not depend on social worth. It does not depend on social worth and dignity, but only on the fact that God has called us into existence and given us that life. And this is the basis for the radical equality of all human beings, so that no one can compare the value or worth of one human life over another as the basis for making certain choices, and the choice as to who shall live and who shall die, and especially during this pandemic, because we know it's not that cheap for a poor person to go through when he's caught up with this coronavirus. And so we need to have that respect for life. We need to look at the life of the other person, especially the poor, the neglected, that their life also is worth, just as my own life is worth living. So, every human being has a dignity, and this is something very nice, that God does not love us because we are lovable, but we are lovable because God loves. So even in his or her life, so even if his or her life is worthless from a sociological point of view, even if he or she is unproductive, or perhaps at times even represents a hampering burden, nevertheless, he or she is a bearer of that alien dignity, the dignity that demands respect for life, that demands respect from every human life. And so we need to respect, we need to have that basic respect for each one. We need to respect life because everyone's life is worth living. Everyone's life is worth living, and everyone loves his or her own life. And so we need to keep in mind this basic principle that life is sacred, life is social, and society as such has a responsibility. And just going towards something with regard to now all this pandemic is going on, and as such, when people would want to hide that they are corona positive because of various reasons, I would say that it would be seriously wrong. It would be seriously wrong and a grave injustice to deliberately and knowingly communicate this disease to someone else. It will be seriously wrong. And so when we know that yes, I have this disease, I have contracted disease, I am positive, corona positive, I have a duty towards protecting the life of my brother and sister. I have the responsibility of protecting and not communicating this virus with another. And so it would be seriously wrong and gravely injustice if we are deliberately and knowingly communicating this very disease or by this very virus to someone else by neglecting all the rules, all the social distancing, all the wearing of the mask, the sanitizer, whatever is being put forward in order to keep this virus away. And so the infected person, I would say, the infected person, not just this virus, but any other disease also, which he or she knows will communicate and destroy the fullness of life of the other person. The infected person is obliged to take every reasonable means to avoid this. And of course, it applies to all the health workers as well, in such a case that also, in such a case, does a person have that right to know his or her own health status. And so I think out of respect for life, we need to hold fast and take up this very principle, respect of life, very seriously, and we should do we should take every step to promote the flourishing of this, and not just respect, but also we do something to enhance the quality of the human life. We need to enhance, and we need to see that the quality of life is improving for everyone, and not just our own self. We need not be selfish with regard to keeping up this, not just my life, but we have an obligation, being a social person, we have that obligation to respect the life of the other person also. And so, I would say this basic principle, let us take to heart. Let us take to heart and let us live this very principle in a most serious manner. Otherwise, we will try to take lives in our own hands. We will take lives in our own hands. And I think that is something which is very, very important, because down the ages, we know that it has been debated with regard to the question of suicide, especially in the situation of pain and disease, especially now in the situation of the farmers. We know that the number of suicide among farmers in Maharashtra is on the rise, and now suicide among the young people, and especially with regular, we know that many, because of the lack of network, also have created the youth, the young people, to commit suicide. Pythagoras, he argued, I'm sure the maths people will know this very well. Pythagoras, he always argued that life was God's and no human being may take it. That's what he said. Pythagoras said that life was God's and no human being may take it. Plato, Father Praveen probably will be able to tell you, Plato was a philosopher. He argued against suicide. He said that Plato said that one must stay alive, that one must stay alive in order to be of service. That's where, among the two basic principles where human beings are social, that's where he comes in play. That he must stay alive to be in service of others. He should be at the service of the society. That's how Plato argued. And so your life is worth. Every life is worth. Every life is important to every person. And so each one of us can play a big role in the life of people, in helping the other's life reach the fullness of life. And Aristotle, another philosopher, he argued that it was a civic duty. It was a civic duty for every person to stay alive. Civic duty, and that also comes in the context of society, of man being a social animal. Man is social, and so he has a duty of enhancing, of promoting the life of the other person. And so we can see that even Immanuel Kant, another philosopher, he also argued that suicide was nothing but a violation of the right to life. And so in itself, he said, it was not good, it was not considered to be good, because every life is a life of God, and that's how Immanuel Kant would say that we are all stewards. We are all stewards, and it is our bounden duty to protect God's life and to live it to the full. So at the end, I would just say this, that we need to respect life. Everyone, my life as well as the life of every human being. And so, because this life is given by God, and it is God who has a right to take it away in the fullness of time. So, I would say, let us take life seriously, not just our own life, but the life of every human being, and let us give and acknowledge the dignity of that person, because all are equal in dignity. Of course, status-wise, there may be a difference, but basically, we are all created by God. And so, this life is a gift. This life that we have is a gift from God. And so, let us protect this life, protect one another's life. Let us have that great respect for human being. Let us not play with the life of the other person. Let us try to enhance, flourish, especially during this pandemic, that we will be able to safeguard this life and cooperate with the society, because being a social person, being a person who has certain civic responsibility, that is also cooperate with the government, with all the authorities, all the municipal authority, in whatever way we can to promote this beautiful life that God has given us. I think I finished my half an hour. 2:30. Praveen, I think that's what.
Yeah. Thank you, Father. Now, Amandip will come to propose a vote of thanks. Amandip, you there?
On behalf of management, Principal Dr. Katie Thomas sir, and staff of St. Francis de Sales College, I extend a heartfelt gratitude towards our guest speaker, Dr. Cyprian Creado, for this wonderful and informative session. And it will surely be going to encourage us. I would also like to thank our participants for watching today's live session of Value Education series. I would now conclude today's program, and I hope to see you all on 24th Feb for another motivating session. I request all the participants to fill up and submit the feedback form given in the description box. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Ma'am, you can stop recording and students can leave now. Only the organizing team can stay back. Yes, our who wants to share? Ritika, ma'am, you're trying, no? Ma'am, you can stop recording and students can leave now. Only the organizing. Yeah, try. All of you one by one, we can try so that next time we don't have this problem. We have long way to go. Yes, our who wants to share? Ritika, ma'am, you're trying. Ma'am, sound is not coming. Ma'am, it's possible that it doesn't play directly from the WhatsApp. You go to your gallery and try playing. Go to the gallery. Go to the gallery. Yeah. We'll try that because from the WhatsApp direct, I don't know what's wrong. Now some sound is coming from who? Sound is coming, but the video is not there. What is that? It is somebody else is playing there. Just try from your gallery. Are you sharing your gallery?
Yes, Father.
Yeah, students can please leave now. Students, only the teachers will remain here.